Good evening, and thank you for listening to the findings from the research project that determined the effects of social-emotional learning on first grade students' well-being at school. Throughout this presentation, I will discuss the purpose of this research study, the research methodology, the research procedures, research findings, and recommendations for future research. The purpose of this research study is to examine how social-emotional learning curriculum impacts elementary students' well-being at school. Research methodology. The students were selected from a first grade classroom in a school in southeastern Pennsylvania. The sample was 17 students from a first grade classroom. This study utilized a pre- and post-test design with a mixed methods approach. Quantitative data was collected utilizing two survey measures, the EPOC measure of well-being and the WHO-5 measure of well-being. Qualitative data was collected through the frequency of observed behaviors such as engagement, perseverance, optimism, connectedness, and happiness. A pretest was conducted using the two survey measures and observations. Then a 4-week SEL curriculum was put into place. The intervention consisted of a daily check-in, learning a new daily affirmation, and learning something new about a classmate each day. After the 4-week intervention was put into place, a post-test was completed using the same survey measures and observation. With both the pre- and post-test, the surveys were read aloud and the teacher assisted in comprehending the questions. Observations were recorded in a 10-minute time frame. Research findings. First, we will discuss the findings from the quantitative data. Within the EPOC well-being scores, an overall increase in well-being across each category was found. Scores were determined in each category out of a possible 20 points. Engagement scores went up from 10.53 to 11.81. Perseverance went up from 11.71 to 13.38. Optimism went up from 11.06 to 12.06. Connectedness went up from 14.29 to 16.63. And happiness went up from 14.71 to 16.38. Based on these findings, it can be determined that the SEL intervention had a positive effect on well-being using the EPOC measure. The WHO-5 measures overall well-being scores out of a possible 25. Using this measure, the well-being scores increased from 15.18 to 16.88 after the SEL intervention. Based on these findings, it can be determined that the SEL intervention had a positive effect on well-being using the WHO-5 measure. Now we will discuss the findings from the qualitative data. The frequency of observed behaviors among each category according to the EPOC measure were tallied in the 10-minute time frame, and then averaged within each category both before and after the SEL intervention. Frequency of observed engagement increased from 3.06 to 4.75. Optimism increased from 2.41 to 3.19. Connectedness increased from 3.18 to 4.25. And happiness increased from 4.53 to 5.75. The frequency of observed perseverance decreased slightly from 1.76 times to 1.56 times per 10-minute time frame. It can be concluded that overall well-being increased with the exception of perseverance. Observing perseverance may have been limited due to the limitation of time to observe such behaviors. Based on these findings, present research findings support previous research that states that social emotional learning improves mental health and overall well-being of young children. Recommendations for the future. In the future, I would recommend modifying the survey measures to be more geared towards first grade level of comprehension. This is a limitation of the research in that there were many challenges with how complicated the survey measure was. Additionally, I would recommend that more time is accounted for observations, as more time can allow for more data and observations that could be a better reflection of the well-being categories. For future research, it would be interesting to take one of the categories related to well-being, such as engagement, perseverance, optimism, connectedness, and happiness, and examine one of those categories in more depth. Lastly, I think that there are other areas of child development that could be evaluated after SEL interventions, such as social skills, mental health, or confidence. Thank you for taking the time to review the findings of this research with me. With more of an emphasis on social emotional learning at a young age, students will likely increase their well-being at school.